Today we're going to do something we haven't done for quite some time, a flip through. I recently got DBMM version 2.1 by Phil Barker. It's wargaming rules for ancient and medieval battles from 3000 BC to 1525 AD. So we're going to do a flip through, just talk about the rules a bit. Well, it starts with the content, and then we go to the rules. And basically, as always, you have introduction and design philosophy, scales, how the author calculates the distances. So it's very precise. He's talking about a man representing 183 meters, around 6 foot tall, and the pace he has and how he calculates everything in different scales. You have the playing area with dice is required, and then you have the troop types, generic troop types that, of course, you have army lists you can purchase. You have an explanation of all the rule types, what they could be: the 100 Years' War, ancient, fast troops, ordinary troops, superior troops. Then we're talking about exchanging mounted and front elements, fortifications, obstacles. And here you're talking about how he talks about how you organize your army and the base depth and width that the author recommends. Then there's more about deployment and some special rules. All these rules are not necessarily for you to play a game. I mean, the rule set looks a bit daunting. It reminds me of of a very badly written Word file with no titles. When I was studying writing Word when I was young, but and of course the writing is a bit confusing, but if you persist, it's not a very complicated rule set in the end, and actually is worth it. So we're talking about war features, generating terrain. Then you have here the deployment and the weather rules, the time and day, excuse me, here. Time and day, of course, if you use it in your game, changes some rules. Obviously, you have weather. It's a rule. The weather is one of the rules that I enjoy. Actually, changing of weather during the battle, the effects of the weather, if it's rain, if it's dust storm, depending on which area you're fighting, and obviously visibility, longbow, and how far you can see your opponent. It's actually quite interesting. So here's fighting the battle. This is where we come here to the important part of the rule where you should start reading if you want to avoid the complicated rules, and you can go there later. We're talking about initiative points, and you roll the sequence of play initiative points. You roll a d6, and then the rules explain. The author explains to you how many personal initiative points, pips, will be spent for different actions, for different troops, for different quality. It's quite straightforward. Then you go to the movement, tactical, march, spontaneous, and outcome moves. You have the element movement. This is the basic, the generic base of the rule. An element is like this. An element basically moves wherever and however it wants, as long as it doesn't exceed its its move distance. But of course, the disadvantage with an element is that you have to spend at least one personal initiative point to move it, so it's not really worth it moving only elements. You're not going to have more than, let's say, 6 if you have one division, so you cannot start moving only elements. Pivots, wheels, group moves, quite simple, expanding, contracting. This is part of all rule sets. And then you have tactical and march moves. March moves are multiple moves. If you're an irregular troop, you can move continuously twice before getting a difficult evolution and then needing more initiative points. And if you are regular troops, you move 3 times, and that is good because you can outflank your army as long as you are 400 paces from your opponent. Paces is the generic paces. The generic distance is usually the base width. 80 paces is the base width, and this is the way you measured it. So you have here spontaneous advantages. Very straightforward. When you have hordes and irregular troops and impetuous troops, they will for sure need to be halted. Otherwise, they have to attack the closest enemy. And of course, the more details, you have halts, how you stop these troops, flank arrivals, moving into penetration, very simple rules. Excuse me, moving into combat, shooting, melee, here. And here you have the resolving combat. That's, I think, one of my favorite parts of the rules, and actually the interesting thing and what I like is you have one die roll and then you have modifiers, not very complicated modifiers that you will probably remember by heart. You roll a d6 and then you check your element, what type it is, and it has a bonus, a combat factor against mounted or against others. Others obviously is foot, and then depending if you are a spear, if you have support, and what is your opponent, you get a +1 or +2. Then you have your tactical factors. If you for shooting, if you are in fortified areas, if you are in high ground, if you have support from the side, and then you go to the grading factors after you calculate all this, and you have a final result. And the grading factors basically will add or remove points depending on your quality, if you're superior or if you're inferior. It's quite straightforward. This is the outcomes. The basic outcome is if you're equal or less. If you're equal, you continue fighting, or if you are less than your opponent but more than half, you're pushed back. If you are doubled, you are destroyed, but there are some exemptions. Then we're talking about pressing forward against shooting. There's something good in this rule set is that I haven't seen other rule sets, is that, and it's very historically accurate, shooting causes disorder and causes breaking of line and causes pushbacks. There's no other rule set at the moment that I know that a unit will be pushed back by shooting and destroy the cohesion of the line. And this is something that, especially in the 100 Years' War, was the main ability of the longbowmen. They were shooting and disordering lines. Here you have destroyed elements, spent elements, recoiling elements, pushback elements, repulsed elements, and routed elements. Very simple, very straightforward. Pursuing, and here's storming for fortification and morale, baggage, broken commands, shattered commands, victory and defeat. And then you have DBMM 100 and 200 for smaller and larger games, and some miscellaneous rules. And here is very interesting. You have all diagrams explain to you movement and situations. This is very helpful. You can see here the element moves however it wants, as long as the distance between the furthest front corner, that's what you calculate. You calculate from the furthest front corner is as per the movement rates. Then you talk about the zone of control of and how things work. What are the movements you have when you're in front of a zone of control, marching, changing formation. These are actually very helpful. Wheel pivot, very simple rules for movement. This is explanation of spontaneous advance. And when you're pivoting and movement in contact with the enemy. The threat zones, as I said, the zone of control is explanation how the rules work and how you negotiate the zone of control. Lining up in combat, moving in close combat, again, another rule. Lining up in combat. There's many explanations that will give you a lot of information from ambiguous situations. Here again, it's conforming to flank contacts. Obviously, this is something that I was confused with, but when you're attacked in the flank, if you don't have an opponent in front of you, you basically cannot be attacked in the flank. You can turn around. It's very obvious because, of course, if you don't have an opponent and you attack, you will turn. If you have an opponent, then it's another issue. Moving, obstructing elements, distant combat, turning and facing, that's the one I was telling you about. Very interesting rule set. Recoil moves, repulse moves. We have so many examples that you will understand. Now we have an exception troops. This is a rule set again for troops that are named X. Now here you have sample army list. Explains to you how the army list works, the naval, the fortifications, And then you have this is what? This is the New Kingdom Egyptian. Very good army list. You have Hittite Empire. You have later Achaemenid Persians, Alexander Macedonian. You have Middle Anglo-Saxon, Norse Viking. So basically, you have armies that can fight each other. 100 Years' War English, and you have medieval French. Very well explained rules with all the types and how many elements you can have. And here is a story background and explain you some situations and how you can dismount some units. And here in the end, you have the quick reference sheets. It's very helpful, very easy to understand. Sometimes the quick reference sheets are much easier than actual the rules of themselves, and you can understand many things from the quick reference sheet. As I said, here are the moves, tactical moves and march moves in good going and bad terrain. Here is the pip expenditure. What you can do, it's very elaborate, a quick reference sheet. How you move in threat zone, command in zone of control of an opponent, the spontaneous advance, interpenetration, pursuing elements. Everything is very well explained. The compact factors, as I said before, rare support, tactical factors, grading, and outcome exemptions. There are some exemptions in the outcome of the rules. So here is the back of the book. So I've been reading it and I've been playing some games. I consider the rules to be excellent. It's very well thought over rule set. If you start with the game sequence, and then you go to the movement and personal initiative points, leave all the others, weather and everything out. Don't bother at the moment. Get a good understanding of the rule set, of the core rule set. That's quite simple, and then slowly add to your game if you want. Anyway, guys, thank you for watching. That was a quick flip through of DBMM by Phil Barker. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for watching, and bye bye. Have a great weekend.